Slide 1. Introduction to Gender Equality, Empowering Women and Girls Globally. Continuing from my previous week discussion, I Harshit Simha, your host, today now discuss about Sustainable Development Goal 5 represents a comprehensive global commitment to achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls by 2030. This transformative agenda addresses both structural barriers and systemic discrimination through targeted targets encompassing economic participation, political representation, and social protection. Globally, progress has been measured but uneven. Educational parity has advanced significantly at primary levels, yet women remain underrepresented in STEM fields and leadership positions. Labor force participation rates stagnate, with women disproportionately engaged in informal, vulnerable employment without social security protections. Critical challenges persist, including gender-based violence, which affects approximately 1 in 3 women worldwide, and the disproportionate burden of unpaid care work, which restricts economic mobility. Political representation has seen incremental gains, though the global average for women in national parliaments remains around 27% as of 2024. The COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated existing inequalities, with increased domestic burdens and heightened economic precarity for women. In India, landmark legislation such as the Women's Reservation Act, 2023, marks significant progress in political empowerment, though implementation delays temper immediate impact. Initiatives like Beti Bachao Beti Padhao have improved sex ratios and educational access, yet deep-rooted sociocultural norms continue to constrain full economic and social participation. Achieving SDG 5 necessitates robust legal frameworks, transformative social policies, and targeted investments in women's health, education, and economic opportunities. It requires not merely policy changes but a fundamental shift in societal attitudes and power structures to ensure women and girls can fully realize their rights and potential as equal agents of sustainable development. Slide 2. Understanding SDG 5, Definition and Framework. Sustainable Development Goal 5, SDG 5, seeks to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls by 2030. This goal recognizes that gender equality is not only a universal human right but also a prerequisite for building a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world. Without dismantling barriers that perpetuate inequality, societies cannot attain inclusive development or resilient progress. The United Nations has outlined a comprehensive framework for SDG 5 that encompasses social, economic, and political dimensions. Central to this framework is the elimination of discrimination against women and girls in all its forms, whether in education, employment, healthcare, or social participation. Discrimination, often deeply embedded in cultural and institutional structures, must be addressed through policy reforms, awareness campaigns, and inclusive governance. Another critical target is the eradication of violence against women and girls, including domestic violence, sexual exploitation, and harassment in both public and private spheres. This necessitates stronger legal protections, enforcement mechanisms, and support services for survivors. Furthermore, SDG 5 calls for the elimination of harmful practices such as child marriage, forced marriage, and female genital mutilation, which remain widespread in many regions. These practices not only violate human rights but also impede education, health, and socio-economic opportunities for women and girls. Equally significant is promoting equal women's participation in leadership and decision-making. Equal representation in political, economic, and social institutions ensures that women's voices shape policies and development agendas. Enhanced access to resources, technology, and economic opportunities further strengthens empowerment. In essence, the framework of SDG 5 underscores the interconnectedness of justice, opportunity, and equality. Realizing this goal requires comprehensive reforms, societal transformation, and sustained commitment at global, national, and local levels. Achieving gender equality will unlock human potential and drive inclusive, sustainable development worldwide. Slide 3. Historical context of gender equality movements. In India, the feminist movement has a rich and unique trajectory, intertwining with the anti-colonial struggle. Figures like Savitribai Phule and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar advocated for education and rights for women and Dalits from the 19th century onward. Post-independence, movements addressed issues from dowry deaths to political representation, culminating in recent legislative achievements like the Women's Reservation Bill, 2023. This historical evolution demonstrates that gender equality is not a singular achievement but a perpetual struggle to redefine power, agency, and justice across evolving societal contexts. The pursuit of gender equality is a complex historical continuum, marked by distinct waves of activism that have progressively expanded the scope of women's rights from formal legal recognition to substantive social and economic empowerment. The first wave, emerging in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, primarily focused on securing fundamental political and legal rights, most notably suffrage and property ownership. The second wave, gaining momentum in the 1960s and 1970s, broadened the discourse to encompass reproductive rights, workplace equality, and the dismantling of patriarchal structures under the mantra that the personal is political. The third wave, beginning in the 1990s, introduced intersectionality, a framework pioneered by scholar Kimball Crenshaw, which critiqued earlier movements for often centering on the experiences of white, middle-class women. This wave emphasized the interconnected nature of gender with race, class, sexuality, and other identity markers, advocating for a more inclusive and diverse feminism. The contemporary fourth wave, amplified by digital activism and movements like #MeToo and #NeUnaMenos, focuses on combating sexual violence, promoting body autonomy, and challenging systemic misogyny through globalized, decentralized networks. Slide 4. Global significance of gender equality. Gender equality represents a fundamental human right and a critical catalyst for sustainable development, economic prosperity, and social stability worldwide. Its significance extends beyond moral imperatives to demonstrate measurable socio-economic benefits. The McKinsey Global Institute estimates that advancing gender equality could add $12 trillion to global GDP by 2025. Societies with greater gender equality exhibit stronger economic growth, enhanced productivity, and greater resilience to economic shocks, as women's participation diversifies skills and perspectives in the workforce. The cross-cutting impact of gender equality is evident across multiple dimensions. Educated women reinvest up to 90% of their income into their families, creating intergenerational benefits in health, nutrition, and education. Countries with higher female political representation demonstrate increased investment in social protection, public health, and education infrastructure. Furthermore, gender-inclusive approaches are essential for environmental sustainability, with women's participation in climate decision-making leading to more effective resource management and disaster resilience. The COVID-19 pandemic underscored both the fragility of gender progress and its necessity for crisis recovery, as nations with stronger gender frameworks demonstrated more robust socio-economic responses. Despite this understanding, the World Bank reports that nearly 2.4 billion women globally lack equal economic rights, and at current rates, closing the global gender gap may require 131 years. Achieving SDG 5 therefore remains not merely a standalone goal but a foundational prerequisite for achieving all sustainable development goals, from poverty eradication to climate action and peaceful societies. Slide 5. Global Gender Gap. Where we stand today. Contemporary assessments of global gender equality reveal a landscape of uneven progress and persistent structural barriers. According to the World Economic Forum's benchmark reports, the timeline to close the global gender gap has extended to 131 years, signaling a concerning deceleration in advancement across key dimensions. The COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated existing disparities, particularly in economic participation and care burdens, erasing years of incremental gains and highlighting the fragility of achieved progress. Regional analysis demonstrates striking contrasts. Nordic nations continue to lead through robust policy frameworks and cultural commitment to equality, while regions such as the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia confront deeply embedded sociocultural and legal constraints. The economic participation gap remains the most challenging domain, with women globally facing occupational segregation, wage disparities, and underrepresentation in leadership roles. Even in regions with high educational attainment, labor force participation rates for women remain disproportionately low, indicating a leaky pipeline between education and economic empowerment. Beyond economic metrics, significant gaps persist in political representation, health access, and personal security. Technological change and climate disruption present both risks and opportunities, with potential to either reinforce or reduce existing inequalities depending on policy responses. The current trajectory underscores that without accelerated investment in gender-responsive policies, legal reforms, and transformative social programs, the global community will fail to meet its commitment to gender equality as envisioned in the Sustainable Development Goals. Slide 6. Global Comparison. Nordic Model. The Nordic countries, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, and Iceland, consistently dominate global gender equality rankings, offering a compelling paradigm of synergistic policies that address both structural and cultural barriers to gender parity. Their success is not attributable to any single intervention but to a holistic ecosystem of mutually reinforcing measures spanning economic, political, and social domains. This integrated approach has transformed gender equality from an aspirational goal into a measurable social and economic reality. Gender quotas in corporate boards, Norway mandates 40% women, have increased female leadership representation. Individualized taxation systems, transparent pay policies, and robust anti-discrimination laws further level the playing field. At the heart of the Nordic model lies its revolutionary parental benefit, family policy framework. Generous, non-transferable parental leave policies, such as Sweden's 480 days of paid leave, with dedicated quotas for each parent, fundamentally reshape domestic labor dynamics. By incentivizing fathers to participate in caregiving, these policies disrupt the traditional gender division of labor, normalize male caregiving, and reduce the motherhood penalty in professional advancement. Coupled with universal, high-quality childcare from early age and flexible work arrangements, these measures enable high female labor force participation rates, which exceed 75% in these nations. Economically, the Nordic approach combines progressive regulation with market incentives. Individual taxation systems, as opposed to family-based taxation, remove disincentives for secondary earners, typically women, to enter or remain in the workforce. Mandatory pay transparency legislation, corporate board quotas, Norway's pioneering 40% requirement, and strong collective bargaining through gender-sensitive labor unions have substantially reduced gender pay gaps and vertical segregation. These countries demonstrate that market efficiency and gender equality are not competing objectives but complementary forces that drive economic resilience and innovation. Politically, the Nordics have achieved remarkable representation, with women constituting 40 to 47% of national parliaments and frequently holding key ministerial portfolios. This achievement stems not from constitutional quotas but from voluntary party quotas, gender-balanced cabinets, and increasingly, feminist foreign policies that prioritize gender equality in international engagements. The political culture normalizes women's leadership across all sectors, creating role models and reinforcing aspirations among younger generations. For emerging economies like India, the Nordic experience offers several transferable insights: the critical importance of universal childcare infrastructure, the transformative potential of incentivizing paternal involvement in caregiving, the effectiveness of transparency mechanisms in reducing pay disparities, and the value of integrating gender equality across all policy domains rather than treating it as a standalone issue. The model demonstrates that achieving gender equality requires sustained commitment across generations, but that the returns, in economic growth, social cohesion, and human development, make this investment one of the most effective strategies for national progress. Slide 7. Gender equality in India. Historical context. India's pursuit of gender equality is characterized by a complex interplay of progressive ideals and deep-seated socio-cultural constraints, shaped across distinct historical epochs. In ancient India, a paradoxical tradition prevailed: the veneration of female deities and the existence of matrilineal systems in regions like Kerala coexisted with oppressive practices such as sati, child marriage, and female infanticide. The colonial period, 1757 to 1947, introduced transformative social reforms, driven by both indigenous movements and colonial administration, leading to the abolition of sati, 1829, and advocacy against child marriage. The independence movement marked a critical juncture, with women like Sarojini Naidu and Aruna Asaf Ali occupying central roles in the struggle, thereby legitimizing women's political agency and influencing post-independence constitutionalism. The constitutional era, 1950-present, enshrined gender equality as a fundamental right and laid the groundwork for subsequent legal protections. However, a persistent implementation gap remains, reflecting the tension between statutory advances and resilient patriarchal norms. This historical trajectory underscores that legislative and constitutional achievements, though foundational, have been insufficient in dismantling structural inequalities. Contemporary efforts must therefore address not only policy reform but also the transformation of societal attitudes and institutions that perpetuate gender disparity. Slide 8. Legal framework for gender equality in India. India's legal architecture for gender equality is among the world's most comprehensive, rooted in a constitutional mandate that explicitly prohibits gender-based discrimination and empowers the state to enact affirmative measures. The foundational provisions, Articles 14, 15, 3, and 16 of the Constitution, establish equality before the law, prohibit sex-based discrimination, and enable special provisions for women and children, creating a robust framework for substantive equality. This constitutional vision has been operationalized through landmark legislation addressing various dimensions of gender injustice. The Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act, 2005, and the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace, Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal, Act, 2013, provide critical mechanisms against violence and exploitation. Reforms in personal laws, such as the Muslim Women Protection of Rights on Marriage, Act, 2019, which invalidated instant triple talaq, demonstrate the state's evolving commitment to protecting women's rights within religious frameworks. Additionally, the Maternity Benefit Amendment, Act, 2017 extended paid maternity leave to 26 weeks, aligning with global standards. Despite this progressive legislation, a significant implementation gap persists due to inadequate institutional capacity, socio-cultural resistance, and varying levels of judicial awareness and enforcement. Legal advances often remain inaccessible to marginalized women, particularly in rural areas, due to procedural complexities and social stigma. The effectiveness of India's legal framework thus depends not only on the continued evolution of laws but also on strengthening enforcement mechanisms, enhancing legal awareness, and ensuring intersectional accessibility. Slide 9. Economic participation and gender pay gap. India confronts a profound and paradoxical crisis in women's economic participation, characterized by a declining female labor force participation rate, FLFPR, now among the world's lowest at approximately 19%, and persistent gender-based wage disparities. Contrary to global trends where economic development typically expands women's workforce engagement, India's FLFPR has fallen significantly since 1990, reflecting complex structural and social barriers. The gender pay gap, estimated at 19% for comparable work, underscores systemic inequities in hiring, promotion, and compensation practices. Women remain heavily concentrated in informal, low-productivity sectors with limited social protection, while their representation in senior management roles stagnates at around 17%. A critical underlying factor is the disproportionate burden of unpaid care work. Women dedicate nearly 5 hours daily to domestic responsibilities, almost 10 times more than men, constraining their availability for paid employment and career advancement. This economic marginalization is exacerbated by sociocultural norms restricting mobility, occupational choice, and asset ownership, alongside inadequate supportive infrastructure such as affordable childcare and safe transportation. Addressing these challenges requires not only targeted labor policies, such as promoting pay transparency, strengthening anti-discrimination laws, and expanding childcare support, but also transformative shifts in household dynamics and social norms to redistribute unpaid work and recognize women's economic agency. Slide 10. Political representation in India. India's journey toward gender-inclusive political representation remains a complex paradox. Despite exemplars of female leadership, most notably Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and, more recently, President Draupadi Murmu, along with a number of female chief ministers, women continue to be underrepresented in national and subnational legislatures. As of 2023, merely about 14.6% of Lok Sabha MPs, 78 out of 543 seats, are women, while the Rajya Sabha reflects a comparably low figure of approximately 14.2% female membership. These numbers starkly contrast with the demographic reality wherein women comprise nearly half of India's population. In contrast, women's representation in local governance structures, particularly Panchayati Raj institutions, paints a more encouraging picture. Following the implementation of the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments, which mandated a minimum 33% reservation for women in panchayats, rural and urban local bodies have achieved over 40% female representation, directly empowering a sizable constituency of women in grassroots decision-making. Yet, the Women's Reservation Bill, aiming to extend a similar 33% reservation to Parliament and state legislative assemblies, languished for decades amid political resistance, only to move forward with renewed momentum in 2023 and eventually gain passage in 2024. This development underscores both the persistence of institutional inertia and the potential for structural reform to redress gender disparities. In sum, while local-level quotas have demonstrably elevated women's political presence, upper legislative bodies remain conspicuously devoid of gender parity. The incremental success of the Women's Reservation Bill may signal a nascent shift toward more equitable representation across governance tiers, but only continued legal enforcement, political will, and cultural transformation will ensure its efficacy and sustainability. Slide 11. Violence against women in India. Violence against women in India remains a profound and persistent challenge, undermining both gender equality and human rights. According to the National Family Health Survey, 2019-21, approximately 29.3% of ever-married women aged 18 to 49 have experienced domestic or sexual violence, with pregnant women also significantly affected. Underreporting is profound. An estimated 87% of victims never seek help. Sociocultural norms further entrench violence, as indicated in a recent analysis. 45% of women justify spousal abuse, and in some southern states, up to 80% of women believe husbands are justified in using physical violence. Child marriage, another entrenched form of gendered violence, persists despite legal prohibitions. UNICEF reports that the rate of girls married before age 18 declined significantly, from 47% in 2005-06 to 27% by 2015-16. More recently, data confirm a 22.3% prevalence in 2021, reflecting national progress yet underscoring sustained prevalence. In the domain of public and workplace harassment, women's safety remains precarious. A Deloitte 2024 report found that 43% of women in India report harassment or microaggressions at work, while nearly half express fear for their safety at work or during commutes. Although the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Act, 2013, mandates prevention and redressal through internal complaints committees, compliance is notably poor, particularly among smaller employers. A recent Hindustan Times account also reveals that 70% of women do not report workplace harassment, reflecting institutional and cultural barriers to justice. Taken together, these realities underscore the urgent need for robust legal enforcement, culturally sensitive educational campaigns, and systemic reform. While legislative frameworks exist, addressing gender-based violence at scale requires strengthening implementation mechanisms, expanding access to survivor support, and transforming the social norms that condone violence. Slide 12. Harmful cultural practices in India. Despite numerous legal prohibitions and progressive reforms, certain entrenched cultural practices in India continue to undermine gender equality and women's rights. Son preference and sex-selective practices have contributed to a skewed sex ratio. Although the 2011 census reported approximately 908 girls per 1,000 boys, evidence suggests continued demographic imbalances and a persistent cultural bias favoring sons. Child marriage remains disturbingly prevalent. While the national proportion of women aged 20 to 24 married before age 18 declined from approximately 49% in 1993 to 22.3% in 2021, regional disparities persist. For instance, in Bihar and West Bengal, nearly 41% of young women were married as minors, far exceeding the national average. Programs like Beti Bachao Beti Padhao and Kanyashri Prakalp have demonstrated localized success, notably in states such as Jharkhand, Rajasthan, and Madhya Pradesh. Dowry practices, despite being illegal since 1961, persist and frequently spur severe violence. The National Crime Records Bureau reported over 6,000 dowry-related deaths annually between 2017 and 2022. Investigation bottlenecks further compound the crisis. Only about 4,500 dowry deaths lead to charge sheets, and judicial delays impede accountability. Disconcertingly, estimates of dowry-related killings range widely, from hundreds to tens of thousands each year. Honor killings, violent reprisals often targeting couples crossing caste or religious boundaries, remain another tragic outgrowth of patriarchal control, though precise figures are scarce. These killings underscore the lethal consequences of cultural orthodoxy and caste-based enforcement. In sum, while the trajectory of change is undeniable, harmful cultural practices endure. Addressing them demands more than legal instruments. It requires sustained investment in education, robust enforcement, community sensitization, and interventions that empower women at every level of society. Slide 13. Government initiatives in India. India has implemented a spectrum of government schemes aimed at advancing gender equality across education, economic inclusion, and safety domains. The flagship Beti Bachao Beti Padhao (BBBP) seeks to address declining child sex ratios and enhance girls' education and welfare. Although its results have been mixed, with improvements in sex ratio at birth in several states and increased institutional deliveries, first trimester antenatal care, and girl-child survival, its implementation has been critiqued for disproportionately focusing on publicity over grassroots investments. The Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana, promoted under the BBBP umbrella, has catalyzed substantial financial inclusion for girls by encouraging long-term savings through dedicated accounts. On the empowerment front, the National Rural Livelihoods Mission (NRLM) has mobilized over 7 crore women into approximately 70 lakh self-help groups (SHGs), fostering financial autonomy, social capital, and diversified livelihoods. Complementing NRLM, women-led initiatives like Akka Cafes in Karnataka, operating through SHGs, are driving tangible economic returns, with mobile cafe units expanding outreach to new communities. Concerning safety and support, one-stop centers, OSCs, operating under the Nirbhay Fund and supported by the 181 Women Helpline, offer holistic assistance, medical, legal, counseling, emergency shelter, to survivors of violence yet persistent challenges, including infrastructure gaps, staff shortages, and rural inaccessibility, pose significant constraints on their effectiveness. Recent data from Jharkhand's OSCs further emphasize operational hurdles that hamper systemic outreach. In summary, India's government initiatives display both breadth and ambition, from addressing gender-biased demographics and promoting financial inclusion to supporting survivors of violence. However, their transformative potential hinges on rectifying implementation gaps, ensuring adequate resourcing, and extending robust monitoring frameworks to enforce meaningful, sustainable outcomes. Slide 14. Role of men and boys in achieving gender equality. Gender equality remains unattainable without the active participation of men and boys as allies and agents of change. As primary beneficiaries of patriarchal structures, men possess disproportionate influence to challenge harmful norms and reshape power dynamics. Global initiatives like He for She and Men Engage Alliance demonstrate the growing recognition that engaging men is not peripheral but central to transformative progress. Effective strategies begin with early education that deconstructs gender stereotypes, fosters emotional intelligence, and promotes respectful relationships among boys. In adulthood, men's visible adoption of equitable behaviors, such as equally sharing domestic and caregiving responsibilities, taking parental leave, and condemning sexist language and practices in workplaces and social settings, can normalize gender parity. Institutional allyship is equally critical. Male leaders advocating for women's representation, supporting anti-harassment policies, and mentoring female colleagues help dismantle structural barriers. Ultimately, challenge harmful norms involving men and boys not only accelerates progress toward equality but also fosters healthier societies characterized by mutual respect and shared responsibility. In India, organizations like Men Against Violence and Abuse, MAVA, have pioneered community-based interventions that engage men in preventing gender-based violence through dialogues, workshops, and media campaigns. These efforts highlight that redefining masculinity is not a zero-sum game but expands freedoms and improves well-being for all genders. Slide 15. The path forward, recommendations and conclusions. Achieving substantive gender equality demands an integrated, multi-sectoral approach that addresses both structural barriers and socio-cultural norms. Economically, implementing workplace flexibility, affordable childcare infrastructure, and rigorous equal pay enforcement could unlock an estimated $770 billion in economic value for India by 2025, while dramatically increasing female labor force participation. Politically, the swift operationalization of the 33% reservation in legislatures is critical for ensuring women's voices shape national policy and resource allocation. Educational reforms must prioritize retention at the secondary level, particularly in STEM fields, supported by safe transportation and mentorship programs to counter high dropout rates. Legally, enhancing implementation through fast-track courts, specialized police units, and robust survivor support systems is essential to translate statutory rights into accessible justice. However, technical and policy solutions alone are insufficient. Transformative cultural change is needed to challenge patriarchal norms and redistribute unpaid care work. This requires community-led engagement that involves men and boys as active allies, alongside media campaigns that redefine gender roles. Digital inclusion must also be prioritized to prevent new forms of exclusion. Legally, it was emphasized implementation focus, fast-track courts, police training, support services that lead to greater justice access, reduced impunity. Globally, lessons from high-performing countries demonstrate that equality is achievable through consistent investment, political will, and holistic policy frameworks. For India, converging these efforts, economic, political, educational, and cultural, within a coordinated national strategy offers the most promising pathway to accelerate progress toward SDG 5 and build a more inclusive and prosperous society. This brings end to our presentation. As we move forward, we shall begin exploring Sustainable Development Goals 6, Clean Water and Sanitation. We encourage you to stay connected with our channel for the upcoming session, and to share this content with fellow professionals who share their passion for sustainable development with our channel. Until then, I wish you all about their professional journey filled with excitement, challenges and sustainable prosperity.